SpoilerCon.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
This is sort of going to be, if this is a week out, little week and a half out from publishing, this is pretty much the final opportunity, if you're hearing this, to get SpoilerCon tickets. It may even be too late.
It's probably not too late. But seriously, don't wait any longer.
Yeah. No, like, if you want to go and you want to get tickets, it's now or never situation. So we've got a good group showing up already. Things are pretty finalized in terms of planning. And I just highly recommend showing up because we're going to have a great time.
Yeah. And don't worry about the whole like hotel room block thing and calling them. Just book on the website like a normal person. Turns out that's going to be simpler, and I will go no farther into the weeds with that. That will be simpler. Just book your hotel room like a normal person.
In terms of online SpoilerCon stuff, we have fewer panels, so there's not necessarily a lot of events to attend. We will stream the live recording like we do any live recording, and we'll probably stream Michael Kramer and Kate Redding like we do live recordings. So if you're a Patreon, you should be able to show up in the live recording channel and see that stuff. But we're not streaming it on YouTube or anything like that. We haven't made arrangements to do that. I think those are the only 2 events that we plan on doing live.
Yeah. Because, again, this is just basically CouchCon with a couple of sprinkles. And, we really hope to see you there. It's just going to be a small handful of people, but they're going to be, really awesome people. And we're going to have a really good time in an extremely intimate Wheel of Time convention style setting, like one of the little subgroups of CouchCon at a bigger con. And that's going to be really fun, and we hope to see you there. The other thing I think we do want to mention is just one more update on how Brian is doing, because for the last 2 episodes, you've been hearing our, 10 days delayed or 8 days delayed understanding of what's going on with him. And the latest is that he's not going into an outpatient bed. He's going home because things are going so well that insurance is doing what U.S. insurance does and foisting the burden of care onto people rather than giving them the insurance that they had been paying an arm and a leg for. I don't know a lot of the specifics, but I'm cynical enough to summarize confidently.
Yes, let's just say that Brian is doing well for someone who's had a head injury. It's still a long road to recovery until he's 100%. We don't know the details about that. If you want to know more details, go read his blog. Yeah.
So I just wanted to let you guys all know stuff continues to improve, and we will continue to include the GoFundMe link in the episode show notes and the link to his blogs. Continue to encourage you to send positive thoughts his way, because he's got some work, and Pumpkin is going to be really having to pull her weight around the house.
Start paying rent. Do we know where the GoFundMe is at this point? I haven't checked on it.
I haven't checked on it, but I have the link up right here, and I will just pop over to it real quick. It is currently at $37,755. So we can continue to push it up towards 40. Everyone, let's do it. Let's do it.
I'm 40. Let's see if we can make it 40. But today we're doing Chapter 10, A Plan Succeeds. And this has a couple of POV switches. We've got a Darkfriend, I don't want to call it, say, social, but we've got a lot of Darkfriendery going on.
Plotting, active plotting.
Yeah, and some Black Ajah sisters and really interesting Teleron Riyadh stuff. So this chapter has some meat to it that I really can't wait to dig my teeth into. And I think I spotted 1 or 2 interesting things about the poison dagger in particular.
Ooh.
So that's my teaser. So
strap in, everyone. This is going to be a long one.
Chapter 10, Plan Succeeds. And our symbol is the ring Terran Grial that we see later in the chapter, because they spent a lot of this chapter in Teleron Riyadh.
Yeah. Yeah. And this chapter picks up on the cliffhanger of literally 1 page ago. So not a lot of suspense there, but hey.
Is Elayne going to make it? Yeah. Okay. She's going to. Yes. Yeah. Yes, she's fine. And I think in the last episode, I said this would be good if we actually had a little more interwoven of the stories. Maybe if some of Perrin's story had been between chapter 9 and 10, instead of just all at the beginning. I think this book would have felt less slow. It would have felt more dynamic if we had to wait to find out that Elayne is fine. Healed by Nyneave.
Yep.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Elayne's eyes opened in darkness, staring at dim shadows dancing on misty paleness. Her face was cold, the rest of her hot and sweaty, and something confined her arms and legs. For an instant, panic flared. Then she sensed Avienda's presence in the room, a simple, comforting awareness, and Brigitta's, a fist of calm, controlled anger in her head. They soothed her by being there. She was in her own bedchamber, lying beneath blankets in her own bed, and staring up at the taut linen canopy with hot water bottles packed along her sides. The heavy winter bed curtains were tied back against the carved posts, and the only light in the room came from tiny flickering flames in the fireplace, just enough to make shadows shift, not dispel them.
Elayne's woken up. She hasn't been healed, but she's been detoxed.
Yeah.
Is sort of the best way I can say it. That, like, Nyneave has given her herbs and put a big fire in the room and hot bottles around her to try and sweat out whatever toxins are in the fork root tea that she was given. Because she wasn't physically injured. She was just drugged.
Right. Drugged with a drug that we learned in this chapter has unfortunate gastrointestinal side effects that were not mentioned before. So there's something to heal, get over. There's a discomfort to manage. And yes, Nyneave has gone old school with her treatment.
Kind of think of it like opiates and just the amount of... I don't know if you're familiar, but if you take too many opiates, you can get very constipated.
Yes.
Which is highly unpleasant.
See, I always figured it went the other way with fork root. But I guess I don't really know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Bowel uncomfortableness certainly can be a side effect of drugs, one way or the other.
Either way.
Either way is very frequent with very many drugs. And I do think this one is diarrhea, not necessarily constipation. But
Yeah. To a certain extent, they both feel the same. When your intestines are not having a good time, the pain falls under the same basic umbrella.
Cramping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hell, sometimes, menstrual cramps can be so bad that you're like, wait, am I having, intestinal stuff? Nope, other side of the abdomen, but it's pushing on the same nerves, and you have to,
Gotcha.
feel wait, why is that nerve being stimulated? There's so many ways this could happen. It sucks.
And I've dated enough people to know that sometimes period cramps and diarrhea go together hand in hand.
There's not a lot of room down there for these organs to be having these issues. It's just sometimes they bump into each other. It's a whole thing.
How did this become the poop episode?
Because a newborn baby was mentioned at the very beginning, so now there's poop everywhere.
I blame Satanus.
Yes, thank you, Satanus. Yeah. We appreciate that.
So she finds out that, Dylan got healed, lost a lot of blood, but is, basically going to recover because she got the healing. And the reason that she wasn't healed is because Nyneave didn't have a specific weave to heal Elayne and used herbs instead. Which, to me, I don't know. Couldn't you just use the general 3-weave healing? Not Nynaeve's custom one, but go back to the original traditional Aes Sedai, heal everything, and it all goes away, even if it makes you tired? Yeah,
I have a really hard time with the logic of these rules here. Oh, she doesn't know how to heal this particular kind of poisoning. I'm like, isn't there just an all-purpose food poisoning cleansing weave that would apply here? This feels like a level of nitpicking that Nyneave never has to deal with before or since, and it feels very out of place here.
So I think the answer is in this sense. And she was more prickly than usual about healing of late, ever since it be clear that several of the kin were already outstripping her skill. Nyneave isn't the best at something for once. She's not the best at healing anymore. So instead, she goes, what am I the best at? I'm best at herbs. This is not... I think it's an excuse. I think Nyneave is basically letting Elayne suffer. Not suffer, but she's using the herbs because that's where she's turning to her confident place. She hasn't used the herbs in a long time, and she wants to be the best at something.
That makes so much more sense to me than that these rules are actually at all what's happening. No, we've analyzed these books and these powers enough to know that that's not how it works. I think you're absolutely right. That's Nyneave making an excuse to protect her pride. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense that she wouldn't heal that, right? Heal away the fork root.
Yeah, she can heal anything. oh, I don't know how to heal stab wounds to the liver, only to the spleen. Like, shut up. No, that's not how this works. I mean, later she does say that she's not sure how to fix Rand's eyes when he gets blinded because the eyes are so complicated. But, like, this is a basic poisoning, like, intestinal thing. Like, I will buy that the eyes need special training because the eyes are incredibly complicated. But, like, you ate something that disagreed with you is pretty basic.
Right. And, like, you think that, hey, that's where using fire and healing comes in handy. You search out that molecule and burn it away so it doesn't exist anymore. That's how fire works in the healing process. And that's what she added and made it not just water, earth, and spirit.
Totally. So, I like her pride being the real excuse, the real reason here that works. The other thing that I thought was weird here in terms of bending the rule set is when she's like, oh, you shouldn't be channeling. You should just rest and not channel for a few days. I'm like, why would she need to not channel to recover? Like, what?
Oh, so my assumption is that if she'd been dosed with fork root and hadn't been given the herbs that helped her out, she still wouldn't be able to channel.
Oh.
Right? This has been a short enough time since she was dosed that normally she still wouldn't be able to channel. It's actually only the herbs that Nyneave has given her that are helping her. When she says you should not be channeling yet, I think that might be just like, oh, you like shouldn't be able to yet.
But she's fussing. She's not acting surprised. Well, yeah. She's fussing. I'm kind of with Brian M. in chat that maybe she's just like, oh, well, you're more likely to lose control and hurt yourself with channeling because you're tired. But that just feels like an amount of mother nonsense that just feels like, okay, Nyneave, what is going on?
I think there is a real... She wants her to avoid catching a fever. She thinks she's tired, physically worn out, and there's a chance of getting sick right after being sick, right? If you don't rest enough, you can actually wear yourself out.
Got mildly poisoned with fork root. This feels like Nyneave went from some like highfalutin magic medicine to some like 12th century leeching logic, like in one sentence.
Might just be worried that because she came so close to dying. She might just be fussing over her because like Elayne almost died.
It could be.
That if Mellar hadn't come to the rescue at the last minute, you know, as far as they know, obviously it was all set up, but as far as they know, she's like, you almost died on me today, right? Like, you stay in bed. Like, stop trying to get yourself killed, Elayne. Like, how many times have we all wanted to say that to her? Just stay in bed and keep the bed off the fucking portcullis wall or whatever. Yeah. Right? Like,
no, that's true. It's just, even for Nyneave, this is a lot of fussing and
sure.
Not a level of fussing we see often, and I am so grateful.
So, yeah, this proves Dylan is loyal, so I have toe towards her.
But just a little toe.
Just a little,
I'm really with Avienda on this one. Like, yeah, you owe her, like, you know, a bouquet of roses and a chocolate bar, maybe, but, like, no bending over backwards. Like, you had reason to hold her at arm's length.
So there's a paragraph about Avienda's clothing here, and I didn't understand why she was so eager to get back into Algoda. And, like, was it just because she's around the wise ones and she doesn't want them to see her in pretty dresses because she's worried what they'll think about her, or like what?
No, it's the whole she was enjoying talking about dresses. It's that she's afraid of how much she likes this stuff. And so again, the first excuse she's got to get out of that, she's running away from her own enjoyment. It's just like with Rand, basically.
Just like with Rand. Yeah. Okay. That's fair. Yeah. God forbid she not be at a complete... And it's very much the ideal way of life, right? Like, we are not here to enjoy life. We are here to be tested. This is the threefold land. Life is all about suffering and struggling and trying to do better.
Yeah, and it's a bit like Nyneave, too. There's a really strong identity wrapped up in critiquing this style of dress. And so, you know, they both oscillate in different ways around that issue. This is her overcorrecting back because she's afraid of how much she likes it. That's how I read it. I don't think she's as worried about the wise ones, but it's a really good excuse to say she's worried about the wise ones and have that be what she tells Elayne. And, you know, that's how she can lie to people and herself.
Thanks. Because I had no idea. I was just like, why?
I mean, I'm not sure. That's just my read of it. The only thing I really noticed in that was just how Brigida has adopted Avienda since Elayne adopted her. Now Brigida's adopted her. And it just adds to the whole, like...
family atmosphere.
Yeah, the family drama continues to get more tangled and complex. And it's cute. It's cute. But yeah, then we've got enough luck for a Taviran that Mellar happened to come by and save you. That's so convenient. Whee! And, of course, the line, the pit is the most poisonous part of a peach.
Ah, yes. Okay. Elayne recognized the knife instantly. She had seen its twin in the hand of the tow-headed assassin. So, assassin has a knife, right? After Mellar killed the first two, he took his dagger from the last fellow and killed him with it. They had 4 near-identical daggers between them. Between how many? 3. 2 men to hold me on my feet while the third put a poison dagger in me. Why would there be 4 knives with 3 guys?
Each guy gets a non-poisoned knife and 1 guy gets a poisoned knife.
Mellar had the 4th knife. Mellar had the 4th identical knife, and only Mellar's knife was poisoned. So Mellar sends 3 guys in there with knives, takes an identical knife, poisons it, so he can come in behind them. That way, if he gets in a knife fight with one of these guys, all he has to do is slash him once, non-lethally. The other guy has to kill him with a non-poisoned dagger. It's Mellar's backup plan to take out these guys.
So he wasn't planning on using that knife, but it ended up being necessary, and he had that as a whole backup plan. And
yeah. Well, I mean, I think he knew. I mean, when he's one guy going after a 3, I think he knew there was probably the chance he was going to get a knife fight with one of these guys.
That's fair, even for him.
Yeah. So I think he just rigged the game.
Well, I mean, I know he rigged the game. I said last episode he definitely chose inferior warriors to do this task,
right?
But
this is more evidence.
So he's able to just drop the knife on the ground and say, "Oh, the assassin had it. No big deal."
You can say, "I took it from the assassin."
Because a guardsman isn't going to walk around with a peach pit poisoned dagger just on the off chance that he can kill an assassin. And if he got into a knife fight, he wanted it to end quickly and decisively in his favor.
Right.
I never caught any of that. I always was wondered, like, why there was only 1 poisoned dagger. I was like, why not make all the daggers poisoned? That would make a lot more sense if you want to actually kill her. But galaxy brain.
There are 4 knives and 4 guys, and one of those guys was Mellar. And it's an identical knife because he's also a Darkfriend. He set the whole thing up. Just by looking at the knives, they should have been able to figure that out.
But it's his word against 3 corpses that were all pointed at Elayne. So...
Also, here's the other thing. You send those guys in with knives after Elayne that aren't poisoned. She's more likely to live through the attack enough to get healed. So even if she gets cut, she's going to survive. Mellar didn't want her to die from poison because he didn't want her to die quickly because he wanted to save her. So send the 3... Why would he send any of those guys in with a poison dagger?
There's so many holes in this that the girls should be picking up on. God. Sorry, the women. They're all women at this point. They should know better.
You said that, not me. So lucky thing the first man to reach you didn't have this. 1 stab and you'd be dead. Not lucky that he didn't have it.
Yep.
The guy who had it was never going after Elayne.
Yep. It's a complicated plan. You know why? Because you're adding wrinkles to it that don't exist. It'd be much simpler, less complicated if you knew the truth.
So I spotted that. I saw 4 and 3, and my brain went, no, wait a minute.
Nice catch.
Those don't add up. So I was very proud of that catch.
Yeah, no, me and all of chat appear to be equally in awe. So all of this leads up to Elayne allowing Brigida to assign her a bodyguard, and thus begins a long and comedic plot arc of Elayne and her bodyguard.
Yeah. Well, she gets an all-women guard except for Mellar, because he gets put in charge, which is just like such a setup to be like, oh yeah, she's going to kill him off, so it's women in charge, right? You just know that's going to happen. It's like, oh yeah, the one dude who's evil, who's in charge, not around.
That glass ceiling is being set up to be broken.
Right. Exactly. And doesn't the number of companions like top 100?
Oh god, it goes up so high, and then it goes down, and then it goes up. Yeah, no, it's very comedic watching the evolution of Elayne's guard in the background of all of her scenes.
And Cassile does end up as the head of the.
Yeah, Cassila is like. She's kind of like a third-rate, like, understudy for Brigida. Like, she's just this, like, solid warrior woman just holding down the guard in the background. Like, she doesn't do anything interesting. She's just a rock. And is awesome for that.
And then I have to read the following passage. And I want to ask you, am I describing Mellar? Or am I describing Matt Cawthon? A cold-hearted fellow, though he smiles a lot. Mainly at women. He pinches serving girls. He's tumbled 3 in 4 days that I know of. And he likes to talk about his conquests, but he hasn't pressed anyone who said no. He claims to have been a merchant's guard, and then a mercenary, and now a hunter for the horn. And he certainly has the skills, enough that I made him lieutenant. He's Andoran, from somewhere out west, near Barillon. He says he fought for your mother during the succession. Anyway, so it goes on, but, like, I just was reading that and I was like, every one of those statements applies to Matt.
Yep.
Every single one of them.
Yep. Yeah, it's totally Matt. It's another way that Matt's character arc, that's a way you could see how other people look at Matt. Right? Like, what is the difference between him and Mellar at first glance to a stranger who sees them both in a bar, harassing the serving girls?
And it understands why the girls distrust Matt a little bit, maybe.
I mean, I don't trust people that think that pinching is fine, but you have to say no before I won't sleep with you. Like, that seems... But also, like, I mean, this could have been Matt in another turning. Like, Matt could become someone like Mellar if he had a slightly less good heart, or if he had, like, worse role models growing up or something. Like, Matt could be Mellar.
And especially with the connection to Mili Skane, right?
Oh, yeah. Like, if Mili Skane had somehow, like, mind controlled him, taken him off, given him some reprogramming. Oof. Yeah. Yeah, we can make that Show Matt. Show Matt can do that. Show Matt's dark enough for that.
But yeah, I was reading that paragraph. The whole he smiles a lot, especially at women, caught my eye. And I was like, that sounds a lot like Matt. And then I just kept reading it, and I was like, all of this sounds a lot like Matt.
It really does.
This is evil Matt. This is evil Matt right here.
And it's almost like Mellar has lifted Matt's basic story as his own. Almost. Yep. Not quite, but like almost. And because I noticed that the whole like, oh, somewhere out near Barillon, which reminded me of Lord Luke, right? And how he claims to be, you know, from out west. And it's just like, how many bad guys are going to claim the Two Rivers vaguely as their origin point because they're trying to like do shit with our main characters? Not that many, actually, as it turns out. But this is the second time.
Yeah, and it's strange that it happened twice.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, like, what's going on here? What's the connection to Matt? Will there be a connection to Matt? As far as I know, Mellar and Matt never cross paths, even the slightest.
No, but in a lot of ways, they interact with the same people. Brigida, Elayne, Mili Skane. In the dark and the light, they seem to almost be a mirror image of each other, which the girls interact with, this rogue on both sides. One of them evil, one of them good.
And it's hard to tell which one he is in any given moment. So yeah, I think you're right that there's a lot of reasons for them to just archetypally be mistrustful of Matt, even when they shouldn't be, because he looks a lot like Mellar, who they trust way too much. Elayne's response to all of that is he deserves a reward, like promotion to the top of my bodyguard hierarchy, right out of the gate. Let's do it.
Do you think they suspect him at this point?
I do.
Do you think it's keep your enemies closer situation?
I do, because Nyneave says, one day you will be too clever, so sharp you cut yourself. And Avi says she is clever. It's either it's nonsense statements that are just out of nowhere, or it's them all saying, oh, you're setting him up to take a fall at a time of your choosing.
That if he mentions the poison knife, because he shouldn't know about it, right? So if he mentions the poison knife, they know it was his.
Well, he knows the knife was poisoned because he killed a guy with it. Like, his alibi knows that the knife had poison on it.
Well, I mean, I guess you stab a guy and he dies, you don't necessarily know it's poison.
Well, there was a dark stain on the blade. I mean, I assume that his alibi is allowed to know it was a poisoned knife.
Okay.
But I do think that there's enough suspicion. Because, I mean, they keep commenting, oh, that's a very complicated plan. And Elayne even thinks it internally. And so, you know, I'm no strategist, but I know that really complicated plans tend to be hiding things, right? So I think that it's obvious to everyone that she is setting him up to take a fall. But I question that because it seems like it would have been simpler to just not invite him in the first place, and then it wouldn't have been an issue. So maybe I'm giving her too much credit.
Yeah, I'm nodding. I don't know. It could go either way.
Enemies Closer is the more awesome interpretation, so we can go with that. But maybe we're giving Elayne too much credit. Probably not.
Maybe. Probably not. Jordan likes to make them as clever as he can make them.
And this would be very the style of clever she's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Dealing in a lot of spies, a lot of manipulation, very Aes Sedai politics. You know, what the Grey Ajah should be.
Right. With the Ajah she should be of.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
God, yeah. No, we need to do like a series on TikTok of like, what's their Ajah, what their Ajah should be.
Yeah.
Codswain should be red.
Yes.
His screen should be red. As she's taken down more male channelers than any other red sister.
And she's way more of a hard ass to everyone. I mean, even fits in well with, like, the show interpretation of the red as enforcers of magic users. Codswain would be great as magic police.
Yeah. Yeah. She would be the ultimate red.
Yeah.
And then I love this standoff between Nyneave and Elayne, where Nynaeve's like, you can't go and tell her on. You can't go to sleep. And she's like, yeah, but what if I take that drink that you slip 16 Benadryl into?
Right? Definitely.
Do you think I'll fall asleep then? What do you... And Nynaeve's like, maybe.
Right. I maybe dosed that pretty heavy.
Never mind, that's not important.
Yeah. And then Brigida gives Elayne like a reiteration of the dressing down that Elayne and Nyneave had to receive on Matt's behalf while in Abu Dar. Of like, this person is helping you and you're just being an absolute dick to them. Like, stop being so petty, because this person is actually helping you and you're being very ungrateful. And it's like the second time Elayne has had to get this lecture. From Brigida, no less.
I mean, it's the older sister and the younger sister and her being inexperienced occasionally. And it's funny how, though, as a group, they're able to project experience outside of the group, even while there's all this infighting going on.
Well, they collectively have like 100 years worth of experience between them.
If you include all of Brigida's experience, maybe.
No, that would definitely make the math not work out. But no, it's I guess there's only 3 women that actually have had real lived experiences. So yeah, they have like 60 years of lived experience between
much of which includes being a baby.
Yeah, they have like 3 years of lived experience as adults with doing that.
There we go. That's the number I'm looking for. I was like 100 years? I don't think so.
Yeah, no. I want my Supergirls to be super.
One of the things I noticed was in her purse, the folded silk handkerchief full of feathers she considered her greatest treasure. Mm-hmm. You remember where those come from?
The time that Rand tries to make her a flower when Egwene says, I don't want to be your girlfriend anymore. You should date this girl. And then she leaves and Elaine's like, you should kiss me. And Rand's like, I'm going to try to make a flower out of feathers. Yes, that was in Shadow Rising?
I think so. Yeah, in Tyr, after he takes it.
Yeah, that's... early on in that. Yeah, it's the first time that they hang out together as like prospective boyfriend and girlfriend, and that's why it's her greatest treasure. And he will make her an actual flower after they have a slightly more consummate time together.
So that's just a sweet little detail that she keeps those there.
It's really cute that she carries the feathers with her. It's adorable. So romantic.
Mm-hmm. And then I love Brigida and Avienda sort of teaming up to be like, oh, Nyneave is so arrogant. yeah, she is.
After she leaves the room.
They're like, oh my God, I can't believe she's telling us what to do. But they're both a little terrified of her. It's why one of the reasons Nyneave is so awesome as a character, while not necessarily someone I'd want to hang out with, she's terrifying.
Yeah, Nyneave is terrifying. She's very, very intimidating. And you want her on your side, but you also really don't want to cross her. As proud as a Shida with one goat. And this line that just sums up Nynaeve's arc. The woman who had denied so hard wanting to be Aes Sedai was becoming very much Aes Sedai. It's just, the way that, like, Rand has his, like, red coat, Kalendor, Darth Rand vibe, and that's just one of his major modes. Like, Nynaeve as the Aes Sedai who doesn't quite admit that she's an Aes Sedai. All of her power, all of her confidence, the Kai sign, the shawl. Like, this is a major phase of Nynaeve, and I love seeing her, like, in this zenith of her arc.
Nice. Apex.
Yes, Apex. That was more what I was thinking of.
I like Cod Swain. She is, the very major model of a,
Oh my God, I was just watching that video last night, just randomly on YouTube. Oh my God, I don't know if I'd ever actually seen the original, just in context. Oh my God. The very model of a modern major general. God, that's a wild song.
Right. And so just she is they're the apex of what Aes Sedai are supposed to be, which is this powerful, decisive king and queen makers, like with Zenobia. That they march in, you slap around some nobles with some common sense, throw around way too much power, heal the sick, and storm out again. That, taking a man prisoner who could channel, on the sly. So that to me is sort of what they are. They are the apex ideal of what they're supposed to be, both Nynaeve and Cod Swain, whether you like them or not.
Yeah.
They have a similar sort of arrogance and headstrongness about them.
Right. One of them still has a soul and humility to some extent.
I think
we'll see how many centuries that lasts.
Yeah. So then she drinks the cup, and we end up in Teleron Riad very quickly, because that was a drugged cup of tea. So I had a theory about the Stone Ring ter'angreal. You know how it feels kind of too heavy in the real world, but too light in the dream world? Well, that's sort of like an anchor that's like anchoring, and then you can hold on to that and sort of lean back into the dream world, as opposed to just falling back into it.
Oh, interesting.
And that's sort of what gives you the control. Like, that's sort of the anchor you're holding on to as you lower yourself into the dream world. And sort of that's why it's heavy, because it's anchored in the real world, but then you're just sort of holding onto a tether in the dream world, which is super light.
I like that. I've always known that it had something to do with being in one reality versus the other, and like that's how you can tell that you're in one versus the other. Kind of like Inception does the, top fall over kind of thing. But I'd never actually thought about like what function that serves. And given what we see here with, Nynaeve being all pale and flickery because she's using a copy, like I think you're right that the nature of the ring is to anchor your consciousness to what's happening. Like that makes sense for explaining the weight difference, as well as how they actually function to bring them into the world of dreams. I like that.
But yeah, that's just somehow more anchored in our reality, which lets you reach into the other world without losing yourself.
Right. Yeah, because if you just went in there untethered and loose, you might, never come back and be dead. Right. Which would suck.
You are here too strongly, young bull.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I don't think it's possible to do that while using one of these ter'angreal.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the Scullion on the Lion Throne? Do you think that is a random dreamer, or do you think that is someone of significance, like a Forsaken or somebody else?
Oh, I thought it was just a random...
Okay.
A random instance of a person showing up. He throws those in there now and then. I didn't see anything in it.
Same. Okay. Yeah, I looked at as many details as I could, but the fact that she's very surprised to see Elayne and her clothes flash back to a Scullion's dress when she's startled means she's most likely actually a Scullion.
Yeah.
Who just, and that happens in Teleron Riad. And of course, people dream themselves as kings and queens.
Yeah, why not? I mean, she clearly works here in the palace and has probably, like, cleaned the Grand Hall, Like, of course she's imagined herself on the throne once or twice.
Who hasn't?
Right, exactly.
We get some more flickering of dresses. I don't think see anything special in that.
No, it's fun. It's a good way to watch what's going on in the subconscious of the characters. I think it's self-explanatory enough that we don't need to go through every single transition. It pretty much is what it says on the tin. But it's a really fun way for RJ to give you character development and dress descriptions at the same time. He gets to like double dip two of his favorite things.
People who complain about the constant description of clothing are missing a whole level of detail in these books, because Jordan is communicating with his dresses as to the inner thoughts. He does so much in terms of literary tricks to show you what the characters are thinking without telling you what the characters are thinking. No, he doesn't say, oh, and then suddenly she was thinking of Lan and how much she wanted to make love to him. He says, whoop, her dress, dropped a few inches and the hem came up a few inches, or, he's using the sort of description of clothing to tell you what they're thinking about.
Yeah, he built himself an entire litmus test of a world so that way he could make their subconsciouses more apparent. Like,
right.
In the rest of the books in the real world, maybe he just likes clothes. But in Teleran Riyadh, he built a whole world so that he could use clothes as language. Like, you can't ignore it. But yeah, there's a lot of just basic what we know of the characters in most of these transitions.
But what I like is just how similar it is to Perrin's smell. The way he can smell emotions on people. Like, that's how Jordan is able to also use, like, smells to tell us the same thing that clothing does. And it depends on, when you're in the women's POV, they're looking at each other's clothes. When you're in the men's POV, it's how badly they smell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And there's really cool stuff in this section, not so much about the clothes themselves, but about the way that they change. And that's what I think is important and interesting. So like Nyneave, especially, this is really a scene that shows Nynaeve's clothes, right? So when the only thing that never changes with her is the Kai'Sain, except for when Egwene scares her and makes her think that she's an accepted again real quick. And that's the one time that the Kai'Sain actually goes away. Everything else, it's solid. Every other detail flickers except for the Kai'Sain, except for when she thinks Egwene is about to skin her alive.
She's like, I am a married adult. Mm-hmm. And she's very firm.
And an Aes Sedai, right? The shawl stays about as firm as the Kai'Sain. And then later, when Serena gets mentioned and the weird clothes show up on her, the strange clothes of a fashion that Elayne doesn't recognize, those stay solid for a very long time, which was really interesting.
I missed that. Is that the clothes she was wearing in her vision?
Presumably.
During her accepted test?
Jordan doesn't describe them during the accepted test, but one has to assume that it is high Malkieri fashion, and that's why Elayne doesn't notice it. And when that happens, it does not flicker. She is solidly the Queen of Malkier for, like, that section of the conversation, which is really interesting.
Nice catch. I do notice here when she gets stern, she gains wings of white at her temples. She gets gray hair.
The gray hair she wants so much.
Which I think I saw an article about that, and they were saying it actually was interesting. It took all the ages of the Aes Sedai and their hair color and matched them up and said, okay, at what point do these women start getting described as having gray or white hair versus whatever color hair they have? Is there a correlation to age, and is there an average age at which women turn white? And they figured out about 200.
So Nyneave is going to wait till she's 200 to get the grays she wants.
And being more powerful, it's probably going to take longer.
Girl.
She's probably at the high end of that. She might even be 300 because her life span is basically an extra 200 years on top of, like, somebody else's. So, yeah, I could see where she might be like 300 years old before she starts to get her gray hair.
Yeah, oof. She's going to hate that. She already hates it. Yeah. Uh-huh. The other fun thing I liked here about the Teleran Riyadh mutability is seeing how good Egwene is with it. The part where she can make a chair appear behind her and sit on it without looking. Her clothes don't flicker. When she wants to get from one end of the room to the other, she just is in one place versus the other. I love, love, love seeing people actually maxing out the potential of Teleran Riyadh and just seeing Egwene's casualness from the eyes of a novice like Elayne, who's like, I think I know how to do the things, and yeah, she's kind of good at it, but just seeing Egwene giving her lessons right and left is just, I love it so much.
It's the difference between someone who knows how to use computers and someone who's like been a computer programmer their whole life and can sit down and like write code.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah. Speaking of making Teleran Riyadh, shall we talk about Elayne?
Yes.
Because that, man, I do think there is some parallels there, especially when she gets into like the matrices talk. that there's some parallels between programming and what you're doing with Terran Grial is programming a weave into the physicalness of the metal or whatever you're making it out of.
For sure. So tower politics stuff is kind of what the conversation revolves around. Now that we've talked about the women and what they're doing, the actual meat and potatoes of their conversation has to mainly do with tower stuff.
Right. Having the hole under your thumb is very much like having a ferret under your thumb. It wriggles around and tries to bite you. I thought that was a fun little analogy.
Yeah, I'm terrified of ferrets, so that analogy is like, no thank you.
And you get the people who aren't involved telling you, why can't you just say, make it so? And Egwene's kind of like, well, it's a little more complicated than that, because yes, they have to do it if I say make it so, unless they figure out a way not to do it. And so there's a certain amount of bandwidth that I can come up with when I'm pushing these people around. I can only make them do so many things.
There's only so much political will to be spent.
Right.
So it's just really an explanation of the fact that, like, no matter how much power you have, you still need other people to enact that power. And Amyrlin's proclamation is as good as law until the Hall sees a way around it.
I love that. I love that saying. We get this mention of Serena Molloy, who we know is the grandmother who gets incredibly powerful.
And who also was in Nyneave's accepted test. What the fuck? This is not a thing that ever gets resolved, but it is so tantalizing.
It seems like she should be a very important person in their life.
And I think she will be in the Fourth Age. Right. I think she's going to be critical to the whole story arc novel set that is Malkir in the Fourth Age for the next 300-400 years. But RJ is just like, I'm not even going to write those Outrigger novels. That's just entirely an exercise for the reader. Just here's some good seeds. Go wild.
I mean, I see her as the next Amyrlin.
Ooh. I like that. She's a new Aes Sedai, but an old hand at dealing with people's shit.
And the organization she does in terms of the creating families and among the novices, she's obviously an incredible organizer. The fact that the one power wielding it is making her younger and making her ageless. She's going to live for quite a long time. She's only 100 years old, which is baby when it comes to Aes Sedai.
Yeah. I love that because Catswain's obviously going to be Amyrlin for like a hot minute and then she's going to die.
Right.
And then who are they going to pick? Like, good luck getting Nyneave because she will literally punch you.
I will say, I think Catswain's going to retire into the kin and live a nice, long, another 300 years.
If she doesn't want to die in a hot minute, then yes, she will choose to retire at the nearest opportunity. But I could totally see us not having a strong main character Amyrlin hold it for a long time, which gives Serena time to like rise through the ranks and pull a swan and be one of the most rapidly elevated Amyrlins ever. And I want this headcanon so badly. I love it. Even if it means she's not like the advisor to Malkir or whatever, Nyneave doesn't need her. Like the tower needs her.
And so seeing her as the next Amyrlin, that would, put her very clearly in Nynaeve's life for quite some time.
Oh, yeah. The Queen of Malkir and the Amyrlin Seat are going to have a hard time not being close colleagues.
Right. So that leads into an interesting discussion about the Three Oaths.
Yes. We now get the kin retirement 3-oath dissolution proposal.
However, she has changed her mind very quickly. The 3 oaths sworn on the Oath Rod are what make us Aes Sedai. I didn't see that at first, but I do now. Sudden change in perspective that happens very quickly. Why would Egwene have such a sudden change of heart over such an important issue that limits the lives and the power of the Aes Sedai? Is it perhaps someone who is rubbing her head and planting certain ideas in that head? I think the clue that it changed so suddenly, I didn't see that before, but I do now. No explanation, no reason. Maybe a talk with Suan, because Suan did kind of convince her.
That was how I always read it, because Swan's been on that beat, and we know that Swan represents the collective opinion of most Aes Sedai. I always interpreted it as when she realized that retiring into the kin was an option and she wasn't asking people to give up their lifespans, then that allowed her to be okay with it. But I don't really like that explanation. That's just always the one I've worked with.
Sure. It does. Those do all sound probable together, that both Suan talked to her and she found a legitimate way out of the till death do us part of the marriage oath, the Aes Sedai swear to the White Tower.
Yeah. But, and like, we never get a sense from Halima that like she managed to actually do anything like specific to Egwene. We only ever get this vague, I fucked with her head. We never get her being like, I planted a specific thing. But that doesn't rule it out. It just means she didn't think about it directly.
She did say she's under my thumb.
Yeah.
She's under my thumb. What does that mean? And
certainly we've pretty solidly headcanoned that the Three Oaths are a Black Aja machination from a Ishamael machination from way back when. Like, we've
totally
hashed that headcanon out pretty well. So Halima, as a Forsaken, would know that, presumably, at this point, having brushed up against the Black Aja and Ishamael several times. Like, presumably that's basic common knowledge in the dark, that the Three Oaths are there to protect the dark. So she'd have a vested interest in helping Egwene hold on to them.
And she really gets her back up when someone questions her decision, you know? I don't ask anything. Egwene's face was still smooth, but her back had straightened. Her voice cooled and hardened. Her eyes augured deep. Like, that's not necessarily... Yes, that's a little bit of going into Amaryllin mode, but it could also be just like, that's compulsion. She has no choice but to absolutely make that decision. It feels too in character with the conversations that her and Swan have been having, and with the way that she takes this really red sort of absolutist approach to what it means to be Amyrlin, and is a real hardliner about shit. Like, it's abrupt, but it's not out of character for her to make this choice, I think. And I don't want to take away her agency in being a dumbass by just saying it was compulsion. Like, I want her to own this stupid decision. Fair enough.
But it's...
Fair enough.
There's room. There's totally room there for who knows.
And I can also see, discovering all these other groups of channelers, what makes Aes Sedai better than the Windfinders or the Kin or even the Shanchan, right? They have this set of oaths that bind them together and make them something more. They dedicated themselves to a cause, to a set of oaths. Even if it does limit their power, it gains them trust.
And it gives them a special badge. You know, a special in-group, a special reason to be superior, a special reason to look down on others.
And a special look.
Gives them a uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They are the cops of the magic world.
Yeah, and at some point, you really want your culture to stay unique, even if it hurts a little bit to maintain your uniqueness.
Yeah.
Like, that's a feature. I forget exactly how I got on this jag, but I was trying to get to the bottom of, like, something to do with what does it mean to be Jewish. And I came across a whole discussion of, like, what's up with the dietary laws of various religions. And in some senses, it's purely a matter of describing in-group versus out-group. And even when the ostensible, like, food preservation, food safety reasons, like, go away, like, but that's your culture. That's how you can tell that you are of this group and not of that group. And there's reasons to cling to it purely for historical reasons. So, the Aes Sedai are still human. There's going to be a certain emotional clinginess to the thing that lets them know that they're Aes Sedai and not Wilders. Even if it does mean stupid limitations. Like, whatever, it makes them better. But newer Aes Sedai are going to be less committed to that as the next few decades come rolling by. These new accepted that Egwene is bringing in, they're going to be less committed to this stupid self-hobbling culture.
Yeah, I wonder how long the Three Oaths are going to last before they get vetoed, because every other group is not going to have them.
And they're all doing fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, yeah. It's like, what weird Amish enclave nonsense are you Aes Sedai doing over here? You could be having, like, zippers. Like, come on, do you really want to not have zippers just so you can have your cultural identity? You know?
So one final bit of evidence for compulsion. They immediately go from talking about the Three Oaths to talking about the headache, the Halima, and the headache still bothering Egwene. And so there is that way Jordan likes to spin things. He does like to say, like, oh, what could possibly be causing that? So this person over here who's causing that, right? Like,
that's a really good point.
That's the way he structures his chapters, is he likes to point out the villain right after someone questions who could possibly be doing this horrific thing.
That is a really solid argument for there being a compulsion to it. That's a more solid argument than any of the in-world logic. We know how RJ writes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I was like, I knew I had another point somewhere in this chapter that was going to help me. But I was coming up blank at the time, and then I saw it, and I was like, oh, yeah, totally.
That pretty much undermines all of the carefully constructed in-world logic I had. God damn it, Seth.
It's just too close. It's it's on the same page, or on the mirroring pages. It's literally the same. The line lines up in my ebook. One's right next to each other. That
is either he's throwing out a red herring in his own writing style, or you found critical information. One or the other.
What is Halima doing? Well, we just saw a sudden, abrupt change of mind where she didn't really have an explanation. I didn't see it now.
As it says, Halima's massages work wonders.
Yeah.
Like changing Egwene's mind on a really stupid thing that she had a good opinion on before.
Right. And what was so funny is I was reading through this going like, oh, I can't remember if Halima's giving her massages, if this is this a compulsion thing. And then I saw this line. I was like, oh, yeah, Jordan's definitely reminding us that absolutely this is a compulsion thing.
I'm convinced now. The last 15 minutes, and now I'm convinced with one goddamn line. So indignant.
That's how Robert Jordan works. Like that's why it's so fun to go back and reread his stuff, because you read one line differently and all of a sudden a bunch of shit is in a very different context and you interpret in a very different way. You think this character knows something they didn't necessarily know. And everything, the dialogue means different things. The interactions mean different things. I mean, the layers are uncannily good.
Yeah, he's a Mandelbrot fractal.
Right. And I'm sure some of that meaning I'm putting in there, we're filling in some holes that he didn't necessarily think about, but his world is so complete and well structured that the missing pieces have very easy solutions that sort of click right in.
He's got a self-healing, self-referring world. It's wonderful. I love it so much. So,
Lord Luke shows up again.
Sorry, that's the wrong music. He's a villain. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, no, but he's both, right? Lord Luke is the hero, and Isam is the villain of the character, right? Lord Luke likes to portray himself as this good guy, golden-haired hero, riding forth to save the day and wants to be adored by all of his fans. Isam wants to kill a motherfucker.
Yeah. They're both bad, but they're bad with very different aesthetic profiles.
Right. But yeah, this is Lord Luke, which could have been Rand's uncle. He is Rand's uncle.
Literally Rand's uncle. Rand's mean uncle, mind you.
Right.
Yeah, I literally crossed it out in my book to write is over it. Like, he is Rand's uncle.
That's just a little too on the nose, Robert Jordan. Like,
yeah. And so what's happening here, just to set the full 4-dimensional spoilers scene, is that there are 3 different people spying on this conversation.
At least.
There are 3 that we know of. So we've got Luke, who gets seen. We've got door clicking person who isn't seen, and then we've got Tamila, who watches the entire thing go down and spots the other 2 without ever being spotted herself. Well, she doesn't really spot door clicker, but she notices that door clicker is there. And so there's at least 3 people, and I had never quite... I'm still not sure who the door clicking person is, so it's been hard for me to keep track of what's going on here. But Tamila is watching all of this while Luke is like doing his thing and blah, blah, blah.
So yeah, I'm completely unaware who the door clicker is. I don't think it's Mogedion, because she is currently under Morden's control.
Yeah, we don't see Mogedion or Sindane really interacting with the Andoran plot at all, because Morden's not interested in it. The most he's done is point Cheyenne at it. But yeah, I have no idea.
For some reason I was thinking it was Egwene, but it's not. Egwene's in the scene.
It's not Rand. He does spy on her occasionally, but I don't think this time. I'm sure it's very obvious in RJ's style, but,
I'm doing some quick Googling, sorry.
Okay. All good.
Halima seems like a good candidate because she would be spying on Egwene, right? Following her around. Maybe the headaches were to give her access to the world of dreams through Egwene, because I'm not sure if Halima, aka Balthamel.
Do we know that Halima has done dreamwalking stuff?
No.
Okay. Do we know how much Halima is aware of Egwene's dreaming skills?
I think she's pretty aware of them. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so she's a decent candidate.
Moradin,
always a good candidate.
he's definitely a dreamwalker. He could definitely be hanging around there. Definitely be spying on these people. Mogedion, maybe. Always a possibility.
Or Sindane. I mean, either of them could be there as Moradin's eyes, right?
Oh, yeah, because Sindane is out at this point, isn't she? Yeah. This is where the time compression gets weird, because I'm like, oh, yeah, we don't think about Sindane for, like, 2 more books, but...
We've met her
still
at this point.
Yeah, well, we've met her, and then, like, we don't think about her, because like, a week goes by in two books, and so then it's like, oh, yeah, of course you don't think about it for a week, but that's, 6 years in real-world time.
Right. It's not a good guy. I think we can say pretty definitively that whoever this is not a good guy.
Unless it's like...
I mean, unless Rand is fine, but I don't think this is Rand, and we don't have very many good guy dreamwalkers who aren't already in the scene. A wise one would not be that sneaky. A wise one would just march up and smack them all and tell them to go to bed. The Shanshan don't have dreaming. Semirog is completely devoted to the Shanshan plot that she's doing.
Could it be a wise one?
I don't know. A wise one would just march up to them. I don't see a wise one being sneaky like that. And a wise one wouldn't close a door.
Right.
Like, that's such a rookie mistake. It feels like such a rookie thing to do that it's like, who can get to the world of dreams but doesn't often? Black Odja. Another Black Odja? Because we know Tamila is in charge of the dream walking for her group, but there's more than just her group doing Black Odja stuff. What if it's Masana?
Masana. Wait, who's holding the Teleron Riyadh ring in the next scene?
Tamila.
Okay.
But Masana, maybe? I feel like she's too good to let a door click.
But I don't know. She does get her mind running.
But Masana certainly has an interest in all of these people and plots.
At this point, there's so many candidates that I'm starting to get a little overwhelmed, because it really could be just about anybody at this point. We've done nothing to narrow it down, except people who are evil and dreamwalking.
Yeah. Yep.
And not necessarily evil.
Yeah. And chat is not yelling at us a whole bunch of things that we haven't thought about.
Right.
It's Hopper.
Hopper lives again.
All right, so Plotty McPlot plot. We tie together. We combine a bunch of information and figure out that the Shineran rulers who are missing are in Bramwood because finally our characters are talking to each other and exchanging information in one of the 3 beautiful moments in all of Wheel of Time when information is exchanged in a clean and neat manner.
That information gives Elayne an idea to reunite Andor, which is basically say, oh no, look over there, they're going to take over. You better unite behind me or else the bad Borderlanders will get you. Which is essentially the same thing Egwene did with the Band of the Red Hand.
And it works basically as well, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's same idea, same process, works just great. Like, have a threat that you know isn't a threat, but everybody else thinks might be. Make a deal with them on the sly, and then use them as a puppet to scare everybody into joining behind you, because you put yourself in opposition with them, even though it's basically a false flag operation.
Pretty much. But it's more of like the threat of a false flag. It's a false threat rather than a full-on attack. But it's not that dissimilar from what Niall was going to do either with the lion and the plane. Right. Like, it's the same damn idea. Like a common enemy to unite everyone behind my banner so that way they can't say no. And if I have to invent a common enemy, it's for the greater good. It's fine. It is definitely a false flag logic.
At least they're pointing them at other armies, unlike the White Cloaks who just invent enemies out of the populace.
Well, and I mean, even Niall's plan is not to co-opt Rand, but to kill him. And like it's a completely different execution in Niall's thing. But yeah, it's None of it's good, but Egwene and Elayne do it in a way that is pretty much bloodless and pitting like against like, which is at least fair.
Right. And it is clever, if nothing else. But it is funny that, like, now, it's happened 3 times. So Jordan has a certain strategy he likes to go back to.
It works, and these plots aren't talking to each other, so it's not like he's actually recycling it in terms of people's development.
Well, and if you think about it, it's like, it's a strategy that Pedro Nile came up with, and he's one of the greatest 5 strategist generals of all time, right? Currently living. So, yes, it's a clever plan. It's thought up by one of the most clever generals ever. And, of course, these two are discovering it like it's, brand new, but they're smart enough to come up with it.
Yep.
And they're just as smart as a great general.
Yep. Because teenage girls know everything.
Or Robert Jordan only knows one military tactic and he's making it fit all situations. And he's just putting different window dressing on it to make it feel different.
Little column A, little column B.
Damn, meta-analysis.
So now, POV switcheroo. Chesma fucking Emery. She's here. And this is a good section of her because you don't really get to learn about her very often. And there's a lot of fun Darkfriend juicy bits in this next section.
Mm-hmm. So Asney, how are we saying that name?
Asney.
Okay.
It's again just copied and pasted out of the audiobooks. That's how Kate says it.
That's fine with me. I think I got pretty close.
Yeah. So yeah, Asney and Chesmal are doing embroidery and hanging out while Tamila does her dream walking thing. They're kind of on guard, the way Brigitte and Avi and Nyneave and Elayne take turns with each other.
And just in case you weren't aware, these are all Black Ajah. This is the group of 13 Black Ajah that left with Leandrin and became Mogedian's servants, essentially.
Right. She sent some of them off on other missions, and some of them have gotten killed, and some have gotten captured, and this is what's left at this point. And at this point, Mogedian's been captured and taken off on multiple plot points, and these guys are so far left behind at this point.
Nobody gives a shit about them anymore. Like, they are not important to anybody. They're basically rogue agents. They've got a lot of power, and they still need to be taken down, but I think they have to be gathered back in as, like, dreadlords.
Yeah, which I think is basically what happens. Those are them that survive long enough. That's what happens. But yeah, Chesmal is... So we're in the POV of Asney. Asney is actually whose head we're in. And she's thinking about Chesmal. And Chesmal is apparently a very self-aggrandizing braggart who's been involved in a lot of plots. Or at least so she says. That's kind of the character she is. She can't not talk about all the cool shit she's done to the point that you question how much shit she's actually done at all.
Well, and what she brags about is getting the Red to kill Sieran Veyu.
Yeah.
She was the Amerlin after Tamra Osprey, right?
Osprey.
So she was Osprey. What is it?
But yes, I always read it as Osprey as well.
Osprey.
Even in the audiobook, I still want to read it, quote unquote, as Osprey.
Yeah, as Osprey. Yeah.
Yes.
That's just what my memory came up with. Yeah, so once she died, basically shortly after sending the girls out to find
the baby, the boy child,
the Dragon Reborn, this is the one that took over, and then she ruled for like 4 or 5 years, something like that, before she was murdered by the Red Ajah.
It's a real rapid turnover of Amerlins over the period between the foretelling and when Swan gets raised. Like, they have a lot of Amerlins.
And she, like, might have been one of the longer ruling ones, actually, making it 4 or 5 years. I think some of them only made it, like, 6 months or something like that.
Within the last, like, 40 years of Amerlin history, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Asney, we don't really learn much about. She mostly just thinks about the other Aes Sedai.
Right. She's very much a, like, blank slate into this.
Yeah.
I'm getting my metaphors mixed up here. An open book into this room. I'll go with that one.
Yeah. And she's not particularly good at embroidery. She's having a similar experience to Min when she was doing her Elmandretta disguise. I'm like, well, maybe if I keep making this side bigger, it'll even out with the other side. And it's like anyone who's done needlepoint. That is a mood.
All right, so in comes Eldrith off the street. She's a brown. with some news.
Yes.
But first I have a question. Is she actually that absent-minded, or is she just dangerous?
No. She's just dangerous as hell. I mean,
Okay.
I think she's a lot less subtle than Varen with her absent-mindedness.
You think she's just putting it up in your face as an act?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Browns probably over-rely on that stereotype of themselves. And Varen, because she's playing such a deep game, has to be really good about it. But I think Eldrith is just landed on really thick because no one's ever called her on her bullshit.
Then why would she have let her warder catch up to them?
To move them. Oh,
Yeah.
I accidentally forgot. Whoopsie doodle. Now we need to go in the direction I've been saying we need to go the whole time. What a coincidence.
What a coincidence. How did that happen?
Yeah. She's landed on so thick, and the others are just eating it up because Aes Sedai are arrogant, I guess. And like, there's totally were other solutions for dealing with her warder. Like, she could have released the bond and then killed him, for example. That was an option.
Right. Well, was it an option? Was it an option until Brandon Sanderson decided it was an option? I don't think it was. Sorry, little bit of anger with that whole Alana just letting Rand go thing that she could have done at any time.
Yeah. There's a lot of plot holes when you include that mechanic. It's almost like that shouldn't have been included. It's almost like I actually prefer the show's interpretation, where they're like, I think you can release the bond. I read it in a book, maybe, possibly. I prefer that because there's so many problems in the books that would have been just release the bond and then kill him. Release the bond and then not be a fucking liability when you get like it. Yeah, I agree with that frustration.
and I think you can maybe explain it away by saying, oh, well, culturally, I just didn't think that was, the right thing to do, and no one ever, but then how do they know how to do it?
And these are Black Aja. It's not like they give a shit about Aes Sedai culture.
Right.
They don't want to see the world burn.
So,
right. But this frustration leads into she was using this warder as a goad, because if she actually had made that as an accident, they might have figured out a better way to deal with it than her being like, whoopsie doodle, here's a very perfect situation.
Oh, and I love how did you learn anything, Eldrith? And rather than lying, she says, only the pepper sauce wasn't as good as I remember. It's like totally deflecting. I'm sure she learned a bunch. She learned a bunch of stuff. She's absolutely just being like, I mean, that is pretty much a blatant lie, because she just says only that pepper sauce. But
it fits so well with the brown motif that she's putting forward that it just, I noticed that the pepper sauce isn't as good as a memory from 50 years ago. And I'm just like, man, I want to be an Aes Sedai. Live for that long and be like, is the pepper sauce as good? Oh, you've had how many chefs turn over in the decade since I was here last?
Yeah, that's sometimes it does feel like that. If you ever go, like, as I'm getting older and I'm going back to a place, even in Portland, where I'm like, oh, I was here 10 years ago. And then someone's like, is the food here any good? And I'm like, I don't know. It was 10 years ago. And there was a pandemic in between. There's probably not the same cooks. There's probably not the same owner. Like, a lot of places, restaurants don't have, their average lifespan is like 6 years.
Yeah.
You go back to a place after, a decade, you're pretty much not going to eat any of the same food.
Yeah. Though there are sometimes things that will stay consistent, like a grill, right? Like the flavor of the grill won't change, even if the restaurant changes hands. Like,
fair.
The grill will still be there and still have that essential something.
And sometimes you do run into the old guy who's been cooking at that place for, 25 years. And
under however many owners, the chef doesn't change.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I can only imagine as an Aes Sedai that problem just, exponentially gets worse, right?
God.
Like,
you
go back to a place. Oh, I was here 200 years ago.
right.
The time flies when you're, gentling men.
Totally. So, Tamila, walks into the room, having just returned from Teleron-Riyadh, where she was spying on the whole prior section of the chapter.
But the girls didn't spot her, so from their POV, we didn't see Tamila in that scene at all. She wasn't the dork-looking person.
No, she was behind a column.
Right.
Much safer place to be than behind a door, anyway.
Right. Which is, I don't know why they meet in the heart of the stone. There's always people hiding behind the columns spying on them. Right?
It's a classic.
Like, there's always...
It's got good cinematic appeal. Why would we change anything?
Right. Right. It might as well be, those cartoons where there's a hallway of doors and they run in and run out the other, and then cartoon logic starts applying, and they're chasing each other backwards, and that's
very much
what it feels like.
And Eldrith tries to scold Tamila for doing that, but everyone's scared of Tamila because she's basically Semirog 2.0.
Sure, the torturer.
She's
born
eager to torture people.
Yeah.
Asni's thinking, I've tortured and killed people. I don't have a problem with it. But I've never seen anyone so eager to get into doing that as Tamila. And Tamila was who
Terrifying.
was given the privilege of breaking Leandrin. And so they're really all just they've seen the depths of her depravity, and it scares them because there's very few people in the world like her, and one of them is the Promise of Pain is her actual name. So Tamila's scary. I'm scared of her.
And she's frequently described as having fox-like features, which makes me think of the foxes skinning people and using their skin as leather.
Always just makes me think of the fox-faced Lady Cheyenne, who we're about to see.
Right. So there's definitely a certain,
evil.
Foxes evil. They have a certain cunning and delight in pain, which, I don't know.
I mean, they are carnivores with social needs, so they have a sadistic streak as an animal category. Yeah. Tamila brings up this really important conversation of why are we here? Either we're here to deal with Nyneave and Elayne, or ... So she is the one who's really pushing for screwing with Elayne, not through Lady Cheyenne. That whole plot with Mellar is completely unrelated to this, but we now know that there's a whole other Darkfriend plot pointed at her, which is going to lead to the house on Full Moon Street and the loss of Vandene, because we get mention of there's a sister on the inside and all of that.
Walk me through that. What plot are they planning on the inside? Because it's not the one that involves Mellar. It's not the one that involves Mellar following them, is it?
No, that's a whole separate thing. With what happens with this is they make contact with however you say her name, Karen, the Darkfriend Aes Sedai in Elayne's party.
Right.
They make contact with her, and she, I believe, starts killing kinswomen.
Okay.
And somehow, in ways that I forget because they're convoluted, that leads to them tracking her down and Vandene dies while killing her, and that whole thing, which turns into Elayne getting kidnapped, right? And then the whole, they have to get her as she's being taken out of the city, and all of that stuff, which I find very convoluted and annoying. But that is all kind of what Tamila is arguing for here, is if we aren't fucking with Elayne and trying to get to her, what are we doing?
I was trying to figure out that connection, and I was having trouble.
Well, I mean, it doesn't come to fruition for a long time, and even then it's explained in very convoluted ways. So.
Right.
I'm sure I'll be very confused about it when we get there.
Thank you for having that. Yeah, then they talk about their string of failures, which I always think is really funny, that they have gotten just foiled by, we would have succeeded too if it was a few damn kids.
Yeah. And then there's this great thing where Tamila says, oh, well, no one saw me. That should please you, Eldrith. Are you pleased? Eldrith almost stammered, getting out how pleased she was. It's such a power move.
Uh-huh. Well, because Eldrith is supposedly the one in charge, right? She's the boss that was left behind. But because of whatever her persona is, whether it's true or not, she can't really be solidly in charge. She's mostly in charge through trickery.
Well, she was appointed to be in charge, but Tamila's force of will is she's just taking power like a wise one, and the other Aes Sedai are too scared of her to challenge it. So like a wise one, she's in charge now. And then we think about how Asni has 4 warders, only one of whom is a dark friend, which is an interesting thing that never really gets followed up on. But we've got a dark friend, Aes Sedai, who has 3 out of 4 warders who are not sworn to the shadow. Interesting dynamic.
Especially brutal when you think about the fact that Egwene has all warders killed of all the dark friends, or she has them all held hostage at least.
She has them held hostage until she can separate out who is a dark friend and who's
right.
simply suffering the loss of an Aes Sedai. It's brutal.
Yeah, how many of them are going to survive that?
But as we were talking about a few episodes ago, like, the warder bond is brutal in its applications.
Right.
It stands to reason that doesn't stop being true.
Right, okay, and again, talking about releasing it, it seems like an Aes Sedai who's about to be executed, dark friend or not, would release the bond before their execution. And it would avoid half the problems with, like...
Well... here's what I think about that. I think they have to be able to channel to release the bond. So if they're being held for execution and walked up to the executioner's block, they're not going to be allowed to channel briefly just to let their warders go. There is a certain amount of... And maybe that's part of why Alanna didn't release Rand until the last minute, is because she was held captive and thus shielded. I'm pretty sure that it's not a matter of thinking. I think they have to channel to release the bond.
I'll accept that.
At least until we find evidence otherwise, which I would not be surprised if we find. Yeah. And she also thinks about how she has the balefire shotgun.
Yeah, and that she dies in the battle she uses that one in.
Oh, she does.
Yeah,
I didn't look up how she died. Which battle is that?
It's one where the wise ones use lightning and she uses a balefire stick, and this is like...
Is that the Battle of Tarvalin and Telerin Riyadh?
It's when they kidnap Elayne and Elayne gets rescued.
Oh,
so in her rescue, the Windfinders are attacking and they're using light. It's when Brigida's like basically brings them up and is like, I just want you to make a gateway. It's fine, just a gateway. And then she like shows them the soldiers being slaughtered, and the Windfinders step in to rescue Elayne because Brigida guilts them into it.
Asni is using the balefire shotgun to just take out swaths of the army.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so she dies in that confrontation.
Yeah, the Windfinder's lightning her ass nicely.
Good.
Yeah, so that but I think that's a nice foreshadowing of like, yes, she will use the rod, and yes, that's a whole
and she stole it. She was not given that when Moghedien didn't come back. She found where Moghedien had squirreled it away. And does Elayne retrieve it after she dies?
Ooh, that's a good question. Looks like its history cuts off in the chapter where Asni is killed, so no further mention of it after that point.
Some wilder is going to have a very bad day at some point in the Fourth Age when they just find this weird thing and start screwing around with it and accidentally balefire half of their father's cows or something.
Which gives us another POV switch to one Mili Skane, a.k.a. the lady in the barn with the magic dagger.
Can I just read this section in because it's her whole backstory and it's awesome?
Go for it.
All right. The early morning light in the sitting room's windows was gray, an earlier hour than the Lady Cheyenne usually rose. But this morning she had been dressed while it was still full dark. The Lady Cheyenne was how she thought of herself, now. Mili Skane, the saddler's daughter, was almost completely forgotten. In every way that mattered, she really was the Lady Cheyenne of Arhin, and had been for years. Lord William of Arhin had been impoverished, reduced to living in a ramshackle farmhouse and unable to keep even that in good repair. He and his only daughter, the last of a declining line, had stayed in the country, far from anywhere their penury might be exposed, and now they were only bones buried in the forest near that farmhouse. And she was the Lady Cheyenne, and if this tall, well-appointed stone house was not a manor, it still had been the property of a well-to-do merchant. She was long dead, too, after signing over her gold to her heir. The furnishings were well made, the carpets costly, the tapestries and even the seat cushions embroidered with thread of gold, and the fire roared in a wide, blue-veined marble fireplace. She had had the once plain lintel carved with Avarhin's heart and hand row on row. Her whole story in one paragraph, her entire backstory, so much plot, just RJ. Mwah.
That was a nice one. It gives us... That's when he says every named character has a backstory. That's what I want to see.
Totally. All of them have to have at least this much in his head as he's writing the books, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I am skeptical of that claim. It may have been true when he said it, but then he wrote more books.
Fair enough. This is what I'd like to imagine he had in his little mental filing cabinet.
Mm-hmm. How does the timeline in terms of her being a noble or becoming a noble line up with her being in the barn with the knife? Was she a noble at that time?
Yes.
Because she was in nice silk dress and everything and had the magic dagger. So she has been Lady Cheyenne for probably, a decade?
Yeah, I was thinking no more than 15 years. She's not that old. But she was a Darkfriend who was really good at doing her stuff at a very young age. So yeah, I'd say can't be less than 5 years. Probably not more than 15. So yeah, 10. Let's just say a decade for easy math. So yeah, when she met Matt and Rand in the barn, she was deep into being Lady Cheyenne of Arhen.
She's about the same age as Nyneave is what? So she's about 22.
26. Nyneave is 26.
Interesting. There's two different descriptions.
What?
In the Eye of the World, she's about the same age as Nyneave. Well, okay. According to Rand, he thinks her is the same age as Nyneave.
Oh, but Nyneave's slowed, and she looks younger than she really is. So, okay.
And in A Crown of Swords, it says she's about 22. And that's actually 2 years later.
Uh-huh.
So she was 20 when she encountered Rand in the barn.
And she, I believe in Jacob Carradin's thoughts about her, she became a friend of the dark around 16. Or had made her first kill or something like that.
Right. When she's 15, she goes to the White Tower.
Yeah.
Told she can't channel. She becomes a Darkfriend. And then she becomes an assassin, performs 20 assassins in the next 7 years.
So she actually probably was a noble by the time she met... Well, a noble. She had her alias by the time she met Matt and Rand in the barn. But not by a decade. More like by a year.
Right. Right.
Huh.
Because chances are she was probably at the youngest, or at the earliest, she was 16 when she did that. And then she was 20 when she met Rand. So 4 years is the max window she could have been a noble at that point.
But I do definitely think that she was a noble before the events of Eye of the World. Regardless of by how many years, definitely before that. The interaction with Matt and Rand did not elevate her into this position. This is all stuff that happened before Winter Night and all that.
Agreed.
So she is getting wine served to her by Phalion while talking with Marilyn. So we have two Aes Sedai in two very different positions with respect to this non-channeling Darkfriend mastermind. Marilyn Gamalfin. That is the weirdest way to spell a last name, man. Gamalfin. Gemalphin. Gamalfin.
I kind of love the whole word, though. The whole name, the way it rolls. Marilyn Gamalfin. It's
it's a good mouthful.
Yeah. It's definitely testing Michael and Kate and their abilities with that word.
Yeah, and she's the one that likes cats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is the crazy cat lady, Darkfriend. Toxoplasmosis and the Dark Lord on the brain.
Right, and so just saying, she's sort of almost defending an Aes Sedai dignity here because Phalan's being punished.
Phalion
is being punished. And Marilyn's like, hey, leave her alone. And Cheyenne's like, no. I was ordered to punish her. So I'm going to punish her.
It's an interesting dynamic because you can, feel Marilyn being like, Aes Sedai are of a different flesh. How dare you? And yet Darkfriend politics and dynamics are...
Right.
Yeah. And it, again, is an interesting moment where you see Aes Sedai having to... Respect is too strong, but they have to acknowledge the authority of a non-channeler, and they hate that. Light or dark doesn't matter. When an Aes Sedai has to listen to a non-channeler, they are irate about it. Okay, so you remember when Elayne and Nyneave are doing their undercover trip into the Panarch's palace in Tanchico, and Elayne bobs a curtsy to the chef and gets yelled at for mocking her?
Yes, absolutely. I actually just listened to that scene with Never. We were listening to the audiobook on our trip down to the beach.
Nice. So here in this line, Phalion did not even hesitate. She bobbed a maid's straight-backed curtsy. So here we're getting a A maid's curtsy is very, very different from the curtsy that a noble gives to other nobles. So when Elayne did her, bending her back and bobbing her knees and whatever fancy, high court thing, it was supposed to be a straight backed, quick little bob of the knees, not bending her head or all this other stuff. And you're getting this description here, like, no, there is a maid's curtsy. Like, it was obvious back with the land scene, it's obvious what was happening, but here's just your little callback to, no, there is a maid's curtsy, and Elayne didn't realize that.
No, she did a noble's curtsy. And that's why, she got mocked. She basically was calling her a noble.
And saying, yes, ma'am, in a really sarcastic way. And
right, yeah.
So here we've got Scullion not pulling that kind of insolent bullshit and just doing the maid curtsy and scurrying out of the room.
And I think it's important that Cheyenne mentions Moradin chose this for us. That tells us that Moradin is the one in charge. This is not Mogedian's group anymore. We know which Forsaken has, or ever was, really. This is Moradin's group, right? And Moradin is Nabliss. So Moradin is taking orders directly from the Dark One. So this is a short step down from orders from the Dark One, right? You got Cheyenne, Moradin, the Dark One.
Yeah. She is third in the chain from the top. That's a lot. And she's being given a lot of agency. You can see she doesn't have specific instructions, right? It's like, punish Scullion. Do whatever you're going to do with Mellar. Like, she's got a lot of autonomy for a Dark Friend. Most Dark Friends are held on a much shorter leash than what she's currently displaying.
Well, don't piss anybody off. That's the rule.
She is very good at not pissing people off so far.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's shown with the way she treats Scullion.
And the way she treats Mellar, honestly. I mean, she does a very good job of being a quintessential minion of evil. What is her own failure here? There's this line, she thought her own failure was buried deep. What failure is that?
Okay, so it might just be her failure to kill Rand and Matt back in the Eye of the World.
Okay.
So she had an opportunity to do that. Otherwise, I don't know. There's nothing, it's like she didn't fail before. I don't think anyone knows that Matt ID'd her and was following her, right? Like,
did she have an explicit mission in Abu Dar? No, she did, because Karadin told her to do stuff. Oh, but then she got to kill him. So she's definitely off the hook for that.
Right.
Or maybe it was a failure, like, from before. Maybe it's just, like, some failure in her early career as a Dark Friend. Yeah, because even finding Matt and Rand was, like, she failed to kill them, but it wasn't like she was sent on a mission to find them. It was just the dagger sending out the evil bat signal that she came to find. I guess it's still a failure, technically.
It is, but, like, whatever we see, right, that failure, I think, falls on Karadin more than anybody else, right? Because we see her in A Crown of Swords, sort of at Karadin's beck and call, and Karadin's ordering her to kidnap Matt. The next time she shows up, she's killing Karadin. So it's that role reversal where, like, he's clearly failed at whatever he was ordered to do, and we saw him ordered to kidnap Matt.
And we saw Matt
right?
fend off multiple kidnapping attempts.
Right. Right. So that, I think, would be the failure, mostly which would have fallen on Karadin, but I can see your boss failed, you're now in charge, go ahead and kill him.
Which means that her failure is buried deep. She literally put her failure 6 feet under, right? I mean, 6 barrels of brandy under.
Brandy, yeah. A bunch of the bodies somewhere underneath something.
I think that must be it, is she was ordered by Karadin to do something. She failed, but he failed worse. So she's...
Yeah, the buck stopped with Karadin,
right, so it seems she's feeling like she got to skate by on that one, and she just is finger crossing that, like, nope, the only failure on my track record is been expunged, so I've never failed.
Right.
All right, I like that.
And I think the thing that happened in the barn with Matt and Perrin, like, nobody knew she was there.
Exactly, that was so random. That's not a mission. You can't be punished for... Well, you can. The Dark doesn't really have rules, but the thing in Abu Dar makes more sense, I think, especially with buried deep. Like, how would you have buried deep what happened in Eye of the World? Getting to kill Karadin with brandy is like, nope, that's down. That's done.
Yep. He's buried. That's where that... Yeah, I think that's a reference to Karadin.
Nice.
The very deep.
She's also thinks about the fact that she's been given the right to kill both of these Aes Sedai if she would like, and she basically puts a pin in that and says, yeah, I'm going to get around to that. I'm going to need to kill these two at some point, but not yet. And she doesn't get to, but she's that cold.
She would, and she could. The could is the one that always makes me wonder, right? Is it just knifing them? Is it poisoning them? Like, what's her method for taking out powerful Aes Sedai before they channel and kill her?
That is a very good question. Could does not mean can. It just means allowed.
Right.
I would like to think that she's very confident for good reason, and she is not just having hubris. I'd like to think that she knows about Forkroot, or something that she knows would give her the necessary advantage. I mean, yeah, I don't know. That word "could" is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
Yeah, it is. And one wonders is maybe she could order Phaleon to do it, or like even that would be.
She could send them on missions that were absolutely suicidal. Go take out that army single-handed, or something.
I'm not sure that would work.
Yeah.
Well, there is the 3 O's which say you must obey those set above you.
Right. You might not be able to order someone to just die on the spot, but you could order them to walk into a fatal situation. You could also always order them against the Shan-Shan. It's a pretty solid bet.
Bye. Have fun. Yeah. Being a slave. Oh, God. Okay. We get confirmation that one of the sisters in the palace is Black Ajah, which we know who it is.
Yes, not the S name, the C name.
The C name.
And she can do what you need, but it will make time to make contact. We see that contact getting made in an inference later on. It takes a while. For all that they're in the same city, the lines of communication for Black Ajah are very slow.
There's one of the reasons Teleron Riad is such an advantage for our good guys.
Mm-hmm. And my question is, what does Cheyenne want? It says she would have to be Aes Sedai, not just a Darkfriend, to do what Cheyenne needed. What does Cheyenne want an insider Aes Sedai for?
I have zero clue what she wanted her for. None. I did some research, did some thinking, came up with zilch. It's
probably something entwined with the Mellar plot, because Cheyenne is masterminding the Mellar plot.
Sure.
But I guess it's just a way to kidnap Elayne? Because that's what Mellar is ultimately there to do, is to kidnap Elayne. So if the Aes Sedai is supposed to be part of that, then it has to be like the kidnapping Elayne thing, but...
And if this had been before the assassination attempt, I might have thought that like it was like set up the whole framing Mellar to be the hero. Like, but this is after that. And as far as I can tell, nothing else really helps. There's nothing else that helps Mellar.
There's undermining Elaine's hold on the kin by killing a bunch of them and like weakening her collection of channelers.
So maybe that seems to be the order, is just kill the channelers. Because there's too many, maybe weed them out somehow, and maybe she wants to create suspicion, right? That I want these. That was not the plot, to kill the kin and the wise ones.
Sea folk. Just the wise ones, but just the kin, really.
To make them think that there's basically an Aes Sedai killing them off one by one, and to sow distrust between the two groups to drive them off.
Right. The Aes Sedai make a lot of noise about how they're just wilders and they can be swept away easily. But they're still channelers, and so I can see someone like Cheyenne being like, no, that's an army of channelers, and I need to dissolve it somehow. I need to undermine Elaine's control of this power.
Because right here, Marilyn's saying, hey, I can't get in there. There's too many. There's channelers crawling all over the place. And Cheyenne's like, well, what's the solution to that? I need to drive off one of those groups of channelers. I'll have my dark friend go kill a bunch of them in a way that's obviously channeling to sow distrust between the two groups and get rid of one of them.
That's got to be what it is, because we see that happen, and there's nothing else I can think of that is an unresolved event that could possibly be an alternative explanation. But that means that Cheyenne is thinking so much about the politics of the One Power. Not the politics of the One Power, but the strategic importance of the One Power. She's not just writing off channelers as like this giant thing she can't deal with and a god power. She's like, I can take this apart. Which really, I continue to be impressed with Mili Skane. She is, in so many ways, reminds me of Min, because she fucking keeps up. in a world full of channelers, in a world of ancient demigods, she fucking keeps up. She ends up like right-hand man for a brief moment on some plots. Like, she's a badass. She's smart and she knows things and she gets shit done and she's young. I don't like respecting her this much. She's a bad guy.
Let's see. And what's her ultimate fate?
Shit, I don't know. Tell me she vanishes after Knife of Dreams.
No, she's definitely in Towers of Midnight when Elayne disguises herself and confronts Chesmal.
Okay.
And she gets all that information, and then there's a big battle.
She die in the battle then?
Let's see. She is rescued from her cell by Hanlon during Elaine's interrogation attempt at the Black Sisters, which turns into a scuffle. She manages to escape from Camelin and is still at large. Respect for Mili Skane goes up.
Okay.
Damn.
My girl is a survivor.
Damn, Mili Skane. Yes, she is.
Oh, and
she makes it out of all of this
unlike
alive.
someone like Mogedion, there's nothing to mark her out for capture in the immediate aftermath.
No.
No,
all that battle, all that chaos, all those dead.
She gets away in that attack in Camelin, and we don't see her again after that.
No, she's captured, but Hanlon rescues her when he takes Elayne prisoner. He rescues her.
And that's the last we see of her.
And then she's, she's not there when Hanlon kills Brigida and Brigida comes back during the last battle. She's just on the wind.
We don't know that she survives the last battle because she falls off the radar long before then. But it's entirely possible she got away with murder scot-free into the Fourth Age. I'm going to headcanon that because I have a love-hate relationship with her now.
I also like that as one of the early characters from Eye of the World who really, they killed off Pater with the White Cloaks to scare more gays. But then she's this other dark friend. It's one of the reasons I love Bail Domon, right? It takes me back to super early days and Eye of the World, these characters that get named back when there were only a couple hundred characters.
Oh, the sweet days.
Right. Back before it blooms into the thousands. And they have these personalities that I like to, check in on again every once in a while. Bail Domon, no matter how, bland he might get towards the end.
He picks up Egwene for spice. It's fine.
Yeah. I always love a good doobie.
Yeah, we don't get that with the bad guys very often. We get a good handful of good guys, but very few bad guys that last that long through the plot.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to think of any bad guys that are around. Maybe Lanfear, but Sindane.
And Ishi, Moradin.
Right.
But as far as minions of the dark, the White Cloaks, they're not evil, but they're lowercase e evil.
Yeah, but we lose Patron Nile, we lose Bornhold, we get a replacement Bornhold, but we still lose Bornhold.
It's Bayar that we end up with in the end.
Yeah.
Aram degrades into a bad guy before he dies, and then he dies.
Yeah, it's different.
The dads stick around. Tam and Abel. And Brian.
Sure.
Most of the Two Rivers people. But yeah, no, it's I'm really pleased to know that Mili Skane does not die canonically. We can headcanon whatever we want for her.
Mm-hmm. She's off being a bad person.
Being a badass.
Having a blast. Being a badass. She's like, new world, new me.
That's what Moggy is thinking right before the Adom clicks around her neck. Just take away the ability to channel to mark her out, and that's Millie's journey. I wonder if she'll change her name again. New world, new me. New age, new me.
Right. I'm sure. I would like, we should come up with a name for her at some point. Fourth Age Mili Skane.
Yes. And all I have left is the readout, unless you have anything to talk about in the last bit of readout.
Just Hamlin comes busting in like a 90s TV show to applause,
Cue laugh track.
Hey, it's Kramer, it's Hamlin. Yeah, cue laugh track. Hey! And, it's the reveal, right? That he and Mili Skane are all collaborative, that he's actually a dark friend. We know this, but this is when it's, the prestige of the trick, right? He is revealed to be a dark friend who has been set up by the other dark friends and is close to Elayne. It's the time bomb under the chair. It's the ticking that lets you know that something bad is going to happen.
It's a bit of a cliffhanger, like the last chapter, in the sense that it's like a big, huge, swirling reveal, and then the chapter ends. Again, RJ doesn't usually do that. He doesn't usually end on a bang of a note. This is less of a cliffhanger than the last one. And it doesn't get picked up again right away. This is a proper fade to black cliffhanger, where it's like, there's a bomb under the chair, and now we're going to move to a completely different building. Just, we're not staying in that room at all. We're coming back to that in weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah, we get a bunch of Rand before we get to come back and see what's going on with Elayne. So, which, hey, if you're excited about a Rand chapter after all this time, welcome. We finally have a Rand chapter for you, because it's kind of the exciting part of this book, because this is the book of the cleansing from Rand's POV. So, like, Rand's POV, this is one of those times when, like, if you're a fan of the main character, Rand, this is a good book for you. Yeah. Because it gets back to Rand.
Yeah, the only other thing I have in here is just it sets up this weird thing with this bouncer Morellon and Phalion and Hanlon, where there's just this weird, like, who can sexually harass Phalion the most, because sex is the only way to punish women. And it's weird. But we revisit that little...
Oh, it's not the only way.
But we get more of that little arc later with Hanlon and them, and I don't... It's just setting us up to feel gross about the bad people, because they are gross, because they are bad. It's just... That's all that's really left here. It's a weird name, Morellon. I would not guess how it's spelled based on how the audiobooks say it, but here we are. The door opened, and Morellon looked in questioningly, his heavily muscled bulk almost filling the doorway. Beyond him, she could make out another man. At her nod, Morellon stepped aside and motioned David Hanlon to enter, closing the door behind him. Hanlon was swathed in a dark cloak, but he snaked out one hand to cup Phalion's bottom through her dress. She glared at him bitterly, but did not move away. Hanlon was part of her punishment. Still, Cheyenne had no wish to watch him fondle the woman. "Do that later," she ordered. "Did it go well?" A broad smile split his axe-like face. "It went exactly as I planned it, of course." He threw one side of the dark cloak over his shoulder, revealing golden knots of rank on his red coat. "You are speaking to the captain of the Queen's bodyguard."
Next week, same bad time, same bad place.
It went better than he could have planned. He could not have anticipated that she needed a captain for her bodyguard. He was just trying to get into any good graces, and he rolled a natural 20 on that deception check.
He really did. He, the whole sword throwing thing to impale a guy, you've been practicing that in your backyard? What the hell?
He's definitely been practicing that. Her punishment is a lot more than just sexual harassment, but it's just for flavor. Right. It's just
that
flavor
is one
text.
aspect of it. Right.
It's gross.
She has to put up with it, right? She basically has to put up with the same thing the waitresses in any bar he goes to has to put up with.
Yeah, which maybe tells us something about how RJ feels wait staff are ranked in our society.
Right at the top. Right there. Right. Absolutely nobody ever talks back to a waiter or a server or gives them a bad time. There's way too much respect out there for our service staff to ever have anyone yell at them or treat them poorly. Sometimes
Brandon and I are out and our server will they'll feel really safer with us, and they'll even say things like, "You guys have just been so great," and it's all we have done is be polite and patient, and they're taking the time out of their day to stop at our table and say, "You guys have been wonderful, it's been so great." I'm what horrific tour is assholes have you been dealing with that saying thank you is a remarkable moment? Like, oh God, guys.
So that reminded me, I visited my parents this weekend and we went out for dinner.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah. There's things that no. I don't enjoy going to dinner with my parents.
That sucks. Free food should always be enjoyable.
Because, yeah, it's just hard. It's hard. There's a certain way they talk to wait staff that just sets my teeth on edge.
I am so grateful nobody in my family's like that. I can't even imagine. Everyone I know bends over backwards to be polite to the staff.
They think they're being fun. They think they're being an entertaining, fun old couple, and they're not.
Okay, actually, no. I have interacted with one particular old person that was very teeth on edge. Is the right way to describe that particular person's interactions. I am glad I don't have to deal with them now.
They're not necessarily mean, right? It's not that they're mean to the waitstaff. It's just that they want to share their stories. They want you to agree with their opinions. And that's really the last thing the waitstaff needs.
That's some kind of like parasocial, like I'm going to adopt you as my grandchild for 5 minutes to feel good about myself, kind of.
Exactly.
That stuff's gross. That's gross to witness. Someone who's a little senile and can't stop being friendly is fine, but when it's this like, look at how social I am. That's fun.
But yeah, as long as I'm not being poisoned, even if I order something and I get something else, I rarely even bother to complain about that. I'm just like, well, I might have ordered this. This is fine. Fortunately, I have the ability to like eat pretty much anything. I don't have very many dietary restrictions, but and even with like, oh, they forget something, I'm just like, hey, I ordered, a milkshake too, or whatever.
Sometimes you gotta ask for shit, but I always feel so bad asking waitstaff for stuff. But then I also remember the one time that my stepmom literally took a bite of salad and there was a literal like quarter cup of mud just in the salad. And when she told them that there was a problem, they offered her a free dessert as a way of saying sorry. And she did not shut up for the rest of the night about how she should have gotten at least the fucking salad for free. Like, for fuck's sake. It was nasty. Like, just a wad of mud. Like, but I've never seen anything that bad aside from that one time.
And as a cook, I never minded if someone was like, hey, this is rawer than I want it to be. Can you, throw this back on the grill and cook it a little bit longer? Like, that's always fine with me. Like, I've never, because I definitely undercooked a burger or two in my time. Like, I feel bad. I'm like, oh shit, that's right. Raw in the middle. Fuck.
You are human. You will make errors.
Yeah, I will make errors, right? Like, so if something's just poor, like badly miscooked, we're to the point where I can't eat it, I'll say something. But again, there's a way to be like, hey,
like, I don't want to be a pain, but right. Yeah, every time I have to ask staff, I'm always like, I'm sorry, I know you're busy, but I have a problem. I hate it, though. I hate it. Honestly, since the pandemic, I feel bad going to restaurants. They always look so stressed. Like, even the places that I know that the management is good and I can see that the floor is not too full, it's just the overarching strain. It's just like, I want you to have a paycheck, but also I'm sorry to inconvenience you.
It's not an inconvenience. If you're a good customer, it's not an inconvenience.
Which is apparently, like, really rare and really easy. Like, literally, say thank you. Apparently, they don't hear this enough. The way they light up when you say thank you. It's ridiculous. The bar is in the basement.
The other thing I can really recommend, read the signs. Right? That's the most annoying thing. When it's just like, either A, you don't have to ask me because it's on a sign. But, at the same time, as someone who can be sign blind, I get that. But, like, don't do something that's blatantly in big letters, please do not do X, Y, and Z. Or please do X, Y, and Z, Nobody has a problem with special request food, really. Like, if you need something added, need something taken off, like, unless they're a real jerk, they don't care about that. But don't force anyone to be social with you if they clearly don't want to be, right? But at the same, use your please and thank yous. And if something goes wrong, be nice about it.
I feel like it boils down to you have to see them as a human being, not as an extension of an industrial machine.
And that's why it's so hard to describe what you need to do, because it varies from situation to situation, as long as you see them as a human being. Right? Like, it's hard to come up with a list of rules, and I think that's sometimes where, like, the older generation is like, gets like, well, I followed the rules, I don't understand why you're upset. I'm like, because that person was clearly going through something, and you ignored that. And you didn't treat them like a human, you treated them like a cog in the machine.
Yeah. It's not hard. Remember that human beings are human beings, and pretty much the rest will sort itself out.
And, I don't care how many waitstaff there is. If there's a line out the door, everybody's stressed. Everybody's doing their best. Everybody's making mistakes.
Yeah.
And if the restaurant's half empty, maybe if there's only 2 or 3 tables, that doesn't necessarily mean they aren't vastly understaffed. And that one waitress who's rushing around trying to do anything isn't working her ass off trying to cover everything. And especially if there's one person in the restaurant, if you demand complicated things from that person, everybody else then has to wait however long it takes. And that includes ordering really complicated drinks, right? Like, that's a real problem when you have one bartender who's also serving everybody. You start ordering complicated drinks, or several complicated drinks, that person cannot get to anybody else's needs for 5 to 10 minutes, which is forever in a restaurant.
Totally.
So, it's just being aware of the situation and what's going on in the restaurant before you make, time-demanding things. Now, if you're only one there and the person's standing at the bar chit-chatting you, rubbing down a clean glass, sure, ask for the complicated drink, right? Like, that's fine.
Right. Make small talk, whatever. It's fine. But, yeah.
Right. Right.
There's just a weird entitlement when you're paying for a service that people seem to not realize is just because you're paying for it doesn't like supersede the human interaction that is at the core of what's happening.
The only other hard rule I do have to point out is don't be the creepy guy sitting at the bar with a hot waitress who won't fucking leave her alone. Please.
Again, human being, treat as such.
Please. There was several times where I got off work and the waitress would be like, can you just sit at the bar and play interference? And like, I'd usually get a couple of free drinks in that situation, because I would often then be the one sitting there drinking and talking to the annoying guy for a while.
You weren't getting free drinks, you were being paid to run interference.
Paid to, yeah, exactly. But that was too frequent occurrence when I worked at the restaurant.
Like, it's good that you were there to do that, but you shouldn't have been in a position where that needed to happen.
No.
God, that's so creepy. I mean, it's cool when you can just pay a guy in a few drinks to, ward that off, but...
Right, well, fortunately, just timing and when I worked there, but sometimes I wasn't available. Sometimes I had to stay in the kitchen, But I do remember, having those conversations and being like, this dude's super awkward, and he's a paying customer, so we're not going to kick him out. But he's the only one sitting at the bar, and the bartender is trying to deal with tables at the same time, and he just wants to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And so you just sit down at the bar and engage with them. And it's not the most fun I've ever had, but usually also they're much more pleasant to a man who sits down and starts talking to them than the cute bartender that they want to flirt with and are being a dick to.
Well, because he's not trying to take you home. So... Yeah.
No, except for that.
I mean, it could happen, but if you're running interference for the cute female bartender, presumably said target or said predator is not trying to take you home.
Watch your bi erasure.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. But I like to think of bi people as being less creepy.
That is true. It is. I will say it's always straight men. Those are the creepy ones.
But, I mean, it's not to compare you to horrible flying insects, but it reminds me of how if you have one yellow jacket nest around, you don't have more than one. So something my mom taught me as a kid is because we lived out in the country. Well, she still does. I still do. Different area. But lots and lots of various yellow fly bitey bastards. And it sucks when yellow jackets make those big dangerous footballs of doom near like your house, right? But if one starts up in a tree in the backyard, out of the way of everyone, they will have a territorial radius that includes your whole house. And another yellow jacket is not going to decide that your front porch is the place to be. So, something to be said for having your cis men, your yellow jackets, your angry dogs, your poison oak hedges, have those guys on your team. These dangerous, abrasive things can be defensive.
I will say it does occasionally happen in the other direction if you have a dude who wants to fight.
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
Occasionally you get the dudes who are fighting drunks, and they come in and they want to start. This didn't so much happen at every bar I've been at, more the late night like bars with like a concert stage attached. But that one, dudes would come in and want to fight, and in that case, you often would have to have someone. You couldn't have a male confront them,
right?
Because then so you'd have to have female bar staff step in and be like, okay, it's time to go, no more drinks for you. There's no one here who wants to fight you. Like, time to get out. Like, it's interesting. I mean,
got to throw water on it. Yeah.
It's just different reactions to different situations.
Fighting or fucking, different tools.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that the fighting drunk is a real subset of people that are problematic at bars.
Mm-hmm. And you learn as a staff how to, who needs to manage what at any given time and who needs to stand in the background. But yeah, we take care of each other. So the staff takes care of each other at a good bar. I mean, but... Situational
awareness is a good survival tactic.
Yeah. It's just straight drunk white men. It can be very problematic because they have a certain privilege in society. They think they can just...
They're not used to being told no or experiencing consequences. Makes them very dangerous.
Right. Yep.
Good times.
Yeah. So I'm glad I'm working back in an office situation despite, again, every job has trade-offs and drawbacks, right? I'm not going to say that where I'm working now is perfect, but I am doing much better. I was going to say in less dangerous situations, but then I thought about the equipment I'm working with. And I'm like, well, it's a different kind of danger. This is more if I do something stupid, I'm likely to get badly hurt, as opposed to random people can drink too much and decide to randomly hurt me.
Your clientele is less of the hazard, given that your clientele is companies with representatives. Yeah, your workplace environment is more dangerous in a physical sense, but not in a social sense.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But you're dealing with some pretty scary physical hazards also.
Yes.
The tools to make computers do not bite shallowly.
No, they don't. Unfortunately, I'm working more in... There's a couple of different processes. I'm in metal deposition, which is just basically electricity and metal, which a lot of electricity and metal and some heat can be dangerous, right? But I'm not working with toxic chemicals that some people are, and I'm not working with radiation, which some people are.
Okay, yeah, that is probably the safest of the three things you could be fucking with.
And the other two also include high power, right? Like, my department's not unique in that. So, yeah, I talked to my coworkers, and they're like, yeah, this is the safest spot in the factory.
All you have to do is not electrocute yourself. That's it.
Exactly. That's it. And most things have little disconnects that the second you go to open them up, they turn off the power. So it's very hard to hurt yourself. But on that note, I feel like we've been going off for a while.
We have. We should probably kill recording. I am going to keep that treat your wait stuff rant at the end, though. People need to hear that.
Yeah, I think in the 5 years we've been doing the podcast, I discovered a few tricks and turned them over to you when you started doing all the editing, and you've expanded quite a bit from there. And yeah, we've got a hell of a workflow, I think.
Yeah, we sure do. I've expanded it to be almost perfect, and now I need to make it take slightly less time. I have quite the publishing routine. I was telling Seth yesterday in text, and I'll tell everyone here because I feel like bragging. I timed myself the other day on how long it takes me to publish an episode. I finished editing it. It's been exported. To then go from there to fully published to all the social media and Patreon takes me half an hour. And that's with Lilligen's help, because I used to have to find an image to go with the things, and that took an extremely variable amount of time to find a good picture. Lillian has made that an extremely consistent and small wedge of time, which has been great.
She keeps dropping awesome pictures in the live chat during recording while we're talking about something. So it's always like relevant to what we're talking about. It's well edited. It looks good. It has the chapter title in it. And I'm like, damn.
It's wonderful.
That's great.
And I've
wonderful.
decided just recently to use that as the icon art in the Patreon feed instead of the chapter art that we put into the normal podcast. So this is another way for us to QC if this is working for our patrons. If you're in your podcast app and you think you're getting the Patreon feed, you should now be seeing these cool art things that Lillian has been making rather than the standard logos. So that's just a little thing that I've thrown in there for funsies, because I can't. But yeah, otherwise doing all of the social media and everything takes half an hour, despite how streamlined and templated out I've made it. It is, it's painstakingly perfect, and I need to be less painstaking. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know how useful all of that stuff is.
I feel like if you've got it down to half an hour, you're not going to save a lot of time by necessarily cutting out.
There's nothing I can cut out. It's so
optimized. You've optimized the hell out of it. So, at that point, like, as long as we're still publishing on all the platforms that we want to publish on, like, I think it's worth the work, even though it is boring work. That's the administrative bullshit that we have to do to. Of course, I get to say that because I'm not the one doing it. So.
It all started with me trying to imitate what you and Patrick were sometimes managing. And just taking the best example of that and just running with it. And I have run a long ways at this point. Oh my God, Satanis! Hi!
Hey.
Hi!
And how's the baby?
Hi, new dad! How is your human spawn, your human larva? Also, hi everyone else. But Satanis is the one we're really excited about.
We've seen pictures.
Yes.
Cute baby. Yes.
Eating and sleeping. That sounds very appropriate for a newborn.
Baby's doing what baby's going to do. Eat and sleep. Love that.
I've interacted with enough baby animals to know that that's a pretty standard issue.
I think in humans more than most.
Yeah, something to do with the ginormous brain and all of that.
I mean, the idea of a fourth trimester really appeals to me, which is basically the first 3 months the kid is born. We're essentially marsupials, which is babies should be like on the mother and attached to the nipple because that's like the substitute umbilical cord. Basically, is
to say nothing of mom needing to just sleep and heal, like from the whole having a baby thing. So just take a year, just take a whole damn year.
Mm-hmm. I think minimum 3 months. Like the baby should be with parents at all times for the first 3 months. Like
in an ideal world,
right? In an ideal world, right? Yeah, it should be at least 3 months of what do they call that? Parental leave on jobs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard of that in other more civilized countries.
From a more civilized time.
No, that's not true. We do have parental leave here in the U.S. It's just only if your employer decides they want to give it to you. It's not like guaranteed, but it does exist in some pockets.
Which means for most people it doesn't exist.
Anyway, really glad to hear that in the civilized North, Satanis's partner is getting to actually take 18 months off of work as opposed to 18 minutes, which would be about average here in the U.S. Or even just someone who can go in and troubleshoot your computer by like going way down in the program files and be like, oh no, you don't need these. That's definitely some weird extra shit that got installed. And if we just delete these files with random letter number strings, suddenly your computer works. It's like, I know how to delete the stuff in my downloads folder. What the fuck was that? Computer nerds.
I used to know how to do that stuff back in the Windows 98 days and Windows 2000, but I haven't kept up in the last probably 10 years.
When Brandon and I were first getting together, that was kind of how he made his money, was helping out old people in the basic community when their computers didn't work. And because they were old, they had older machines and no sense of internet security. So it was mostly like stupid shit that had gotten downloaded because they played solitaire. And he just had to go in and find whatever random corner of the hard drive had the files that didn't fit and delete them. And I continue to be amazed when he knows how to just navigate down there, because now we're doing GIS stuff and it's databasing real data, but it's just as confusing looking in the Windows File Explorer to me. I'm an object-oriented person. I do not do the how computers work. I do the point and click, the click and drag. Like, I'm in awe of computer people.
I will brag that I can still feel like, find the right instructions online and hack together some pretty decent hacks on a computer without breaking it. And part of the reason I don't know it as well as I used to is they've gotten pretty rock solid, and I haven't needed to fix my computer in really since I built it. It's just been really solid. I did, I have a dual boot Mac, Windows, computer, Linux. It's actually triple boot. So, I know enough to go into the BIOS and hack that up and have different operating systems on the same computer. And I can, hack into one operating system from the other if I need to. And but again, some of that knowledge is now outdated, but it doesn't mean it usually doesn't take long to find something on the internet that can tell me the difference between what I know and what I need to know.
The very cool thing about the internet is it is built by computer nerds. And so figuring out how computers work on the internet is a pretty solid prospect.
Usually works. Yeah, usually works. So, I feel like I have a good base of knowledge, and I hope I never get quite as out of touch as some of the older people are.
I am a pretty big nerd when it comes to installing stuff to do with Reaper. I have had to get pretty down into the not object-oriented space to manage putting in open source tools into this other thing. I've gotten into places I look in the mirror and I'm like, who are you? How are you doing this? This is what is happening. But it's only specifically because podcasting has driven me to that, not because I have a grand understanding of how computers work.
But that's the thing is nobody really, and they're so big. It's such a big domain in terms of software and libraries and, different specs that almost no one can keep track of that stuff anymore unless it's a full-time job. So we all have to sort of find our domains and dig into them and say, hey, this is what I'm good at. I can do this section of computers. And if I need to, I can figure out almost any other section. I just can't figure it all out all at the same time because it's moving so fast. I'd never keep up.
It's true.
So,
it is a collaborative effort.
Right. So, you do what you can. You ask for help when you can. And
you go to YouTube when you're really lost.
So I got this awesome water jug. It's about an inch wide and about a foot tall in the depth of the fridge.
Ooh, nice.
So it just slides in on one side of one shelf and takes up almost no actual shelving room. And then it's got a spout on it and a big filling hole in the top.
Nice.
And it holds a lot of water. It holds I don't know, it feels like 2 gallons of water. That might be an exaggeration, but it's a big container, and I poured pint after pint after pint of water out of it. And it's great rather than having bottles that take up like half the space on one shelf or something like that, because I have just glass bottles that I refill.
But yeah, it takes space.
This was nice. It was, and I saw one, it's one of those things that you see like in a friend's fridge once, like 10 years ago, and you're like, that's such a good idea. And then like, forget about for 10 years. And then suddenly you're thinking like, man, I wish I had something it's 1.2 gallons.
Nice.
I wish I had something that like could like not take up so much room and also hold a bunch of water. And I was like, wait, I saw one of those once. And it was, I went to our Lord and Savior, Amazon, and bought it for $20.
Ah, yes. Our Lord and Savior. No, that's really neat.
So that's where I just went and got some water from the jug, and it's nice and ice cold and convenient.
I really enjoy having the soda stream, putting it in the fridge and having it be nice and cold. And then I have like cold bubble water, not just bubble water, but cold bubble water. It's nice.
So you could fill the soda stream bottle from this thing and then probably fill multiple bottles with each one.
I need more than one of these carafes. Having only one is... they're gonna get my money, those fuckers.
or you buy something like this so you can fill it from the one. You get cold water immediately, and you can just go soda stream it immediately.
God.
You just need more cold water in the fridge that you can fill from.
We have a fridge that was literally designed by an angry devil. It is the worst fucking fridge. Like, I hate it so much, but it works just fine. So like, I can't justify getting a new fridge like anytime soon as a decently new fridge, but oh my God, I hate how it's organized so much.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I'm not sure people don't just organize that because they're getting paid to do something.
My in-laws, they're retired and own their house and are just tricking out everything. And she cooks a bunch. So, of course, the kitchen is where they're really focusing right now. And I want their fridge so bad. It's got such a good light. It's got way too many bells and whistles. But it's like the freezer's on the bottom. Like, why are side freezers a fucking thing? Why are side freezers a thing? They're so fucking dumb.
I visited my parents this weekend, and they have a ridiculous kitchen. Yes, the freezer's on the bottom of the fridge. Their second dishwasher is smaller and is like more just for like cups and bowls and stuff like that. If you just want to do a wash.
Wow.
The trash compactor is in there. The wine fridge is in there. And the whole thing is bigger than my apartment. Also a 2-sided gas-powered oven and stovetop. 2 sinks, an island. My mother used to cook a lot. Doesn't so much anymore just because she's getting older.
But damn it, she's going to have a nice kitchen to not cook in.
Yeah, she spends a lot of time in there, I think.
Yeah, my in-laws is still very much like not mostly done. It's chaos in there. It's such a bad layout originally, but you know, he's doing all the work himself because he's retired and he can, and it's I have so many visions for my kitchen, and it all starts with not having a stupid side freezer. I'd rather have a top freezer than a side freezer. It's just the worst. I'd rather it be on the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
But side is just like, what convoluted hellscape did this design come from?
Right. Because it's too narrow for anything.
For literally anything. And it takes up a fuck ton of space you could have been using for other stuff. Like, we don't even put that much in the freezer, but we're forced to give up huge quantities of valuable fridge space. And then the fridge is narrow. I want a fridge that is like 18 inches deep. I hate deep fridges. Stop. I am a short person. I cannot reach into the depths of frozen hell to find the rotten shit.
How do you feel about top freezers?
They're fine.
Okay.
It seems silly to me because cold air sinks and I don't want to get in and out of the freezer that often. So, like, why not have that at the bottom down near my knees where I don't want to go anyway? But Do
you know why they do that, though? It makes the mechanics of refrigerating really simple because all you do is use the freezer to control the fridge. There's no actual cooling in the fridge.
Because it's just cool air falling from the,
It's cooling air falling from the freezer.
Yeah, and like, that's fine. Like, it's fine. I'd rather just have a refrigerator and a freezer as separate units, honestly. Like, just have a fucking chest freezer. We have a chest freezer. I don't need frozen shit that often. Like,
you also don't live in an apartment with limited floor space.
I don't, and I am grateful for that at least 100 times a day because I did, and it sucked, and I'm still not over it.
So yeah, stacked washer and dryer, stacked fridge and freezer. There's a reason those things exist for apartment dwellers, because it's a hell of a lot better to have it stacked than not have it at all.
This is true.
Anyway, do you want to talk about our POV switch?
Chesma fucking Emery.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?